Prime Minister Mark Carney spent another day at the G7 summit meeting one-on-one with other world leaders. But U.S. President Donald Trump was not one of them, and there's no bilateral schedule despite a request for a formal sit-down from the Prime Minister's office. The cameras did, however, catch this moment between the two as they sat down for a working luncheon. Carney appeared to be defending Canada's decision to allow Chinese electric vehicles into the country.
I thought you'd actually like it.
Later, the Canada-U.S. Trade Minister, Dominic LeBlanc, who was at the summit, was asked about the moment. He said it should come as no surprise to Canadians.
It was an opportunity for the Prime Minister to remind President Trump, as we have with Ambassador Greer and Secretary Lutnick, that this, in fact, takes Canada back to a position in terms of Chinese vehicles of 2 years ago. And it was a time-limited, specific arrangement that provided very important relief to canola producers and canola growers in Canada and the seafood sector in Atlantic Canada.
LeBlanc met with his U.S. counterpart Jameson Greer today while at the G7 summit. He offered few details about the talks, but said they had a constructive conversation. Time now to turn on the microphones of the power panel. Supriya Dwivedi was an advisor to former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Lisa Raitt is a former Conservative cabinet minister. Nathan Cullen is a former NDP MP and BC NDP minister, and Emily Nicolas is a columnist for Le Devoir. Welcome, everybody. Lisa, I'm going to start with you. I have to say, as journalists, the hot mic moment when we feel like we learned something that maybe we weren't supposed to, we're always a little bit fascinated. But what do you think the significance is of the exchange that we saw between Prime Minister Carney and Donald Trump over these electric vehicles?
I can't imagine what it's like being Donald Trump at this event. It just seems like every world leader wants to get in his ear, and it seems that his team, Trump's team, doesn't want to set up a single bilateral in order to facilitate that. So the Prime Minister takes, all the Prime Ministers take, as much an opportunity as they can, regardless of who is in the room and what the setup is. I think everybody knows now that there's live mics around the table. I think that's pretty clear. And if you're saying something, it's okay if it's heard by everybody else. So I don't think it's a faux pas by the Prime Minister per se. It's interesting, I think, to be honest, I think Mr. Trump wasn't agreeing with the Prime Minister. I think he was acknowledging what the Prime Minister said. And those are two different things.
Well, Supriya, that raises an interesting question of the extent to which Canada feels that or the Canadian government should feel reassured, I suppose, by the comments here by Donald Trump. I mean, there he is, saying it on the microphones. Oh, yeah, sounds good. How far does that get Canada?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I hadn't really actually considered Lisa's point of view until she just said it, and I think that's interesting. To me, it sounded like the president was agreeing, but I mean, yeah, sure, it's possible he was just sort of acknowledging it, but I think from the government side, at this point, any sort of agreement or objectively insane statement that you get from this administration when it comes to trade with us, we're going to have to take, right? And I think what was interesting, particularly towards the last comment where he said, I think he did say, like, I like that, or there was something positive that was said, which I think, the Carney government should take was a bit of a win. And I'm not saying, you overextend it, because I think I've been the negative Nelly on this panel pretty regularly that we need to inject some real talk into the notion that we may not get a deal. And if we do get a deal, then it may not mean any more than our current deal, because Trump's word and signature doesn't mean all that much. So I think we should take our wins where we could get them. And, a lucid statement that's positive for Canada is a good thing for the country.
At the same time, Emily, we have Melanie Joly over in China right now meeting with Chinese car makers about setting up shop in Canada. And it seems to me, I'm trying to remember the last time that Donald Trump was talking about Canada. And I believe it was about China, that he was like, great job, Prime Minister Carney, going over to China. And then a few days later, it was like, what the heck are you doing talking to China? What do you take away from all of this in terms of how Canada is managing the U.S. as it tries to grow its ties with China?
I know how we love it as journalists when there's hot mics, but at the same time, I think this moment tells us how, why some of those sidebars or informal conversations should be private, in the sense that maybe Mark Carney says what he says to, it's glass half full, glass half empty, basically. There's a way to phrase the information about how much we're doing with EV cars in China to the president of the US that you basically can share the same information with a different intonation when you're speaking to China and present the glass as half empty rather than half full. And when you have those hot mic moments, when you have bilateral meeting, it's actually, I know that we love it because we had access to information, but I don't think it necessarily is helpful when it comes to then continuing to have the talks with China afterwards. So I think we're lucky that we only basically picked a couple of words, but there's a reason why bilateral talks should be bilateral, and I think we're all the wiser for it. And otherwise, to me, like the body language that tells me the most about this extract is actually Emmanuel Macron walking towards them, realizing the seat is taken, trying to as well have his moment with Donald Trump, and then doing what we are clearly not wise enough to do, which is walk away and understand that this is a private moment. And so Emmanuel Macron is basically leaving them space in a way that CBC isn't doing. But I understand why we're doing it. I understand that. But I know that you also understand my point.
Yeah.
And that while we're hungry for information or trying to understand more, we're really lucky that what we caught wasn't something that is going to be a game changer.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose we would have been interested to hear it, but I take your point about the fact that these things have repercussions, right? Which is, I think, one of the challenges about public discourse writ large.
That's right.
Nathan, I'm wondering, what, if anything, can we glean about the Carney-Trump dynamic, how Mark Carney does business from all of this, like the way he tries to make the case to Trump? I don't know if we're squeezing blood from a stone here. It's a pretty short interaction. But this is a relationship that has such significance for this country, potentially, right? So what if anything, do we learn?
Sure. Well, any moment you have the president's attention is useful sometimes. Depends on the president. Depends on this president's mood. There's different kinds of hot mics. There's ones that are truly accidental, and there's ones where the mic is with a couple feet away, and both of these guys are pros. The table's filled with microphones, and there's journalists in the room. I think this might be the second kind, because the only thing we really were able to pick up from Mr. Carney at the very end, which I thought encapsulated Canada's entire strategy on trade with the U.S., which was, I thought you'd be happy. And that, to me, if you think about all the concessions the government has made leading up to these talks, the posturing and positioning and trying to keep the tempest contained within what is Donald Trump so he doesn't do more erratic and stupid things, has been the approach. Carney probably had to explain to him how big the actual import of Chinese EVs is, which is very small. That would probably be new to the president. But I wouldn't, there's no expectation of privacy, by the way.
Yes.
Come on, you're in a room, there's microphones all over the place. I think the prime minister is a fairly nuanced fella, and he knew exactly what he was doing and was saying things that he'd be fine with on a microphone.
Well, it's not just the prime minister. This was indeed hot mic-a-palooza. So let's listen to a little bit more of what we got out of this G7, including U.S. President Donald Trump talking to EU leader Antonio Costa. Might raise some concerns, certainly raise some concerns for folks in Greenland.
You understand?
Not a lot there, but folks will not be happy to hear that word coming out of his mouth. Also caught on mic, French President Emmanuel Macron, while walking with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, recounting a meeting with President Trump.
Yesterday we had a good discussion
Now, I'm going to say that last one, I tend to think that that Macron would not like the world to hear, Supriya, that it was a difficult conversation, but perhaps, I don't know. So, I mean, give me your insights when you see this whole rash of hot mics. What does it tell us about expectation management, public versus the private. What do you take away from all of this?
I mean, what were the directives given by the AV team as they were being lapelled up? Like, that's the first thing that I'm going through my head. Now this seems like it's like, one is like, okay, two is whatever. But like, that is particularly the last one that you showed with Macron and Zelensky. I mean, that's certainly not a conversation that you would want broadcast or fit for public consumption. So I don't know. It's like, it just doesn't sound like they were given pretty good instructions as to when they would be live and when they would not be live, and when the control could hear them versus when they were going to be listened to by a pool camera or what have you. So I don't know. A big L for the AV team.
Well, I do always think, we have these huge news stories of all manner, and it's like at the end of the day, one or two people made a decision that they have to go home and try to sleep that night thinking about whether or not they hit the wrong button. Lisa, I wonder what all of this tells us. I mean, one thing is certainly that all the moments we're interested in are about Trump, the mercurial Trump. What do we expect from Trump? But it does also give everything a kind of feverish pitch, this sense of overhearing these little moments. What does it mean? At a time where I think with Iran, with Ukraine, with trade, we do feel at times a little bit feverish. What do you take away from it all?
So I'm going to agree with Supriya from the first time around. I do think that the Carney government can take this as a positive, his interaction with Donald Trump. Just because I said Donald Trump was acknowledging as opposed to agreeing has nothing to do with whether or not Mr. Carney was successful in getting his point across. It's all about Mr. Trump and not taking what he says in the moment as one thing, because he can turn his mind to something else later, which is point two I have. Very worried about how Zelensky portrayed the meeting where they had a difficult conversation with Mr. Trump. It sounds like they ganged up on him and they maybe lectured him. And that means hold on to your helmets and wait for the fallout when he returns back to the United States airspace, because who knows what he's going to do in retaliation. He doesn't like to be cornered, and I'm sure he doesn't like to be told things that he doesn't want to hear. It's why he's so successful. He's surrounded by people who will tell him what he wants to hear all the time. So I'm a little worried about the Zelensky comment. The Greenland thing, I really couldn't even hear it, so I don't have much of a context. But overall, what I would draw away from all of this is that Europe and the rest of the G7 were trying to break through to Mr. Trump. Whether or not they're successful, we'll have to wait and see. And that Mr. Carney found, this is, take it for what it's worth. We didn't see the whole conversation. But if the one thing that Mr. Carney wanted to talk to Mr. Trump about was Chinese EVs, it can show you that, like Nathan said, that may be a weakness in our relationship with the United States, and it's a place to tread very carefully.
Emily, I wonder, we're also in a situation, we're focusing on the hot mic because it's visible, but one of the other ways that Trump has changed the conversation here, there's not a joint communique anymore out of these meetings, right? There are these individual side letters. We saw one, I think, on fighting cancer, one on Ebola, which is obviously a very pressing issue of international concern when you look at what is happening right now on the African continent. But what, again, just sort of reflecting on this geopolitical moment and this scramble to get people on side to address some of these big problems, notably to get the president's attention on Ukraine?
There used to be a G8, there's now a G7, but I think in terms of international relation and unity and consensus on just broader principle, we need to, at some point, perhaps name that there's a G6. And there's a G6 that is meeting up with Donald Trump is what's happening. And so there's no longer that shared understanding of what peace looks like, of what trade looks like, of what the world looks like, of what liberal democracy looks like. That is a foundation of usually what makes members of that group. And so I think when you're seeing a lot of other side talks between basically G6 members, and then you're seeing them trying to get attention to the president, I think the G7 is becoming an opportunity for leaders who are otherwise dealing with Donald Trump one-on-one to then be 6-on-1 in some ways and trying to break sense into the man in a different strategy. So to me, that's what the G7 is becoming. There's a lot of alignment between Canada and European leaders on a lot of things, and that's where the action it really has been over the past since Mark Carney's election, basically, trying to get Canada closer to the EU and do more international trade there. And at the same time, there's a lot of shared concern in the G6 because they're all being attacked by Donald Trump in some ways. And so I think that's what the venue is for. And it's really named that way, but I think that's what it is.
Quick take from you, Nathan, on the extent to which this is a useful exercise right now.
Yeah, I mean, Trump hates these things. Like, let's put that in context. He can't stand these international gatherings. He doesn't seem to have a lot of respect for the European leaders or the European group, even though they're a massive economic bloc with some importance. I do worry about the Zelensky thing. I'm stunned that he's raising Greenland again. That went so badly for the Americans last time he tried this. It's not going to go any better. He looks like an idiot, frankly, continuing to talk about Greenland when it did him so much harm and the U.S.'s reputation in Europe so much harm for nothing. For this ridiculous idea that they're going to take over Greenland.
Is the argument, or one of the arguments, not that it is about the chaotic nature of it, right? It is about being unpredictable and keeping people.
But you can. Yeah. There's chaos where you use that unpredictability and putting your opponent off their game. But there's another kind of chaos where you're just continually punching yourself in the face and saying, well, at least it's chaos. That seems to be Mr. Trump's strategy, and U.S. gas prices reflect that. All of our gas prices reflect that right now. So there's different kinds of chaotic strategy, I guess.